Welcome to The Human Experience, a podcast about the stories we live out every day and the importance of championing the vulnerability and courage of the storyteller. I'm your host, Jennifer Peterkin, and it was through my own lived story of experiencing domestic violence that this podcast was created. By traveling the globe and interviewing each guest in person, I am convinced now more than ever that stories have the power to change the world. You can join our community of storytellers by subscribing, leaving a rating and review, signing up for my newsletter, following me on Instagram, and more. Thank you for being here. In a world full of noise, to listen with intention is an act of resistance.
I've had counselors, I've had coaches, I've done holistic medicine, all of the things that you can think of. If there's something, I've probably tried it. And I find new bits and pieces about myself all the time where I'm like, oh, I haven't dealt with that yet. Mm-hmm. And if it was all in front of my face, I couldn't deal with it all at once.
Episode 44 of The Human Experience is Amy's story. At 9 years old, Amy knew that she wanted to join the military when she grew up. And so on her 18th birthday, she signed up for the Army. But 7 days before her basic training would begin, September 11th happened. What followed was a whirlwind of high-stress jobs and relationships, culminating in her leaving her career as an ER nurse during COVID and relocating halfway across the country to purposely pursue a slower pace of life for her family, a space to cultivate joy. Amy now works as a nurse coach, running her own business and living a beautiful life that she worked hard to create. Her story is a great reminder that we can choose change. This episode was recorded in Maryville, Tennessee. I know that your story, at least in your bio that you starts in the military. Mm-hmm. Is that where you...
Yeah, I joined the military at 18. In fact, I told my parents that I was going to join the military when I was 9 years old. And I don't know, I had watched a movie or something and I just decided that that's what I was going to do. And so a week after my 18th birthday, I went and signed up. Nobody in my family knew. And I came home and I told them I joined. And I joined the Army. And you can just imagine how excited my family was. Their youngest daughter was heading off to the military. But then what ended up happening was we ran into September 11th. And September 11th happened, and my date of shipment to basic training was September 18th. So wow. I was laying down in bed, and my aunt comes running into my room and shakes me and says, "Hey, I need you to get up. I need you to get up. We're going to war." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, in my head, I'm like, she's crazy. She just woke me up out of my sleep. Yeah. I'm a teenager, super irritated. And I get up and I walk out there, and I just got out there in time to see the second plane hit the second tower. And I was like, uh-oh, what am I supposed to do with this? So I called the officer that got me in, and I asked him, I said, what do you need me to do? And he said, nothing. Just, you're still going to be leaving on the 18th. I'll reach back out to you if anything's changed. We'll see you in a week. And that was all the information that I got. And so on the 18th, he drove me to MEPS. I lived in California at the time, so San Jose, California. And I got left there for the first time ever being away from home, headed to basic training. And we sat in a room there was about 50 of us. And they asked us to put up our hand and swear to defend the Constitution. And as they did that, they asked, "Is there anybody here who doesn't want to go? Go ahead and raise your hand up, because each and every one of you guys is going to go to war." And I kind of stood there and sat there, and 3 people raised their hands, and they excused them out of the room, and they just let them out of their contracts and let them go. Wow. And I didn't. And I was like, there's no way I'm raising my hand. I've decided since I was 9 years old that I was joining the military. There's a reason. Went to basic training, went to AIT, got stationed at Fort Hood, and then ended up in Iraq in 2003. Yeah, it was wild.
What's AIT?
AIT is oh my gosh, you're going to ask me what it actually means. There is
No, you can just describe it. That's fine.
No, it's basically where you go to get your advanced training.
Okay.
But it's an actual acronym, and I should know this.
Advanced something
yes.
training.
Yeah. It's your advanced specialized training, but it's AIT. I don't know.
Yeah. Fair enough.
Yes. And so I actually was a supply clerk.
Okay.
And also I was an armor, so I was in charge of all the weapon systems.
Wow.
Yeah, for our unit. And so I was stationed in Fort Hood for 4 years. But yeah, deciding to join at 9 years old and then literally being packed up to go to war. I look back at it now and I'm just like, of course we went to war. And of course, because it was put on my heart so much that that's what I was supposed to do, that I just followed it and did it.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, did you have somewhere, or did you have some inkling at the time of why this was such a big thing for you?
I can't even tell you now, but when something becomes a decision that this is what I'm going to do, that's it.
Okay.
And that's just it. And I'm not saying that doesn't come with, like, I'm not scared, I don't struggle to take the next step, but all of that comes with it. But it's like, I realize now, looking back at all this time, that each time that something was presented to me and I just knew that it was what I was supposed to do, I was all in. And that's happened kind of over and over and over again.
As a theme in your life. Yeah. That's fantastic. I mean, it is incredible because I feel like we all do this to some degree, in terms of like, I'm going to be a teacher when I grow up. That was me. I am not a teacher. And so there are some people, you included, that really, they know in their gut, they know, and they actually follow through with that. And the timing of this was just incredible. I mean, to be in the same month of 9/11 happening and having to, at 18 years old, having already made the decision to go, but not having that knowledge yet, that must have been really just a lot to deal with in your mind. Or were you just like, nope,
No,
this is what I'm doing?
It's interesting because I remember being excited. Not excited that I was going to war, but almost this excitement that, oh, this is why I was called to this. So like this knowing that I was exactly where I was supposed to be.
Sure.
Of course, I will never get excited about war. I've seen it firsthand. It is not a pretty thing. But I was excited to know that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But one of the struggles that I had was I had a major breakdown in basic training, where I like cried my eyes out, and my drill sergeant pulled me aside and asked me if I wanted out. And I said, absolutely not. And he goes, well, you're going to have to pull it together then. But I just was like, the realization that I was not going home to my family after this, that I had the next 4 years planned out for me and I couldn't just back out or go home.
Yeah.
Like, I was there and I was committed. That was the first time I've ever been away from my family. So that was a gnarly feeling.
Yeah.
I almost felt trapped. Like, oh my gosh, what did I do?
Yeah, sure. I can imagine.
But yeah, major breakdown. I even remember a couple of the other girls that were there that were older, and they were like, Amy, like, you're amazing, but you got to pull it together. And I'm just like, I don't know if I can.
Yeah. I don't know how to pull it together at this point.
I cry a lot.
And that's okay. Yeah. So you said Fort Hood?
I was stationed at Fort Hood in Texas.
So 2001, in September, you went to basic, you went to specialized training, and then you got shipped up in 2003 to, where did you go?
We went to Iraq. And we left, they came in, we knew that we were planning on going to Iraq, but we didn't really have a date, and we weren't sure if it was going to come through or not, right? Like, we're waiting for orders. So on April Fool's Day at 4 o'clock in the morning, I got a bang on my door. My platoon sergeant came and opened the door and said, hey, Specialist Murphy, you need to get up, get dressed, and get your bags packed, and we need you downstairs within an hour, and your room needs to be sealed. Basically, like, you need to have everything packed up. And I'm like thinking to myself, oh, this is a drill, or this is April Fool's, because we've done these things before. And no, they were very serious.
Wow. What a bad day to choose to do that.
Yeah. Within 12 hours, we were on a plane leaving for Iraq. Wow. So I called my family and was like, hey, I'm leaving today. And kind of interestingly enough, like, I didn't want to really talk to them. I just wanted to say goodbye and like get off the phone. Like,
yeah.
I did not want to have.
It's a lot.
Yeah. And at 18, I was 20, I guess. So I was 20 when I went to Iraq. But that age group too, like, you don't want to communicate feelings. Like,
Yeah.
you're just like, yeah, bye. See you later.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not in touch with this part of myself.
Not at all. Not at all.
I mean, I imagine it's very common. I have not been in the military, so, and I'm just thinking mentally and emotionally, having to switch from like, okay, I'm on base to I'm on a plane to Iraq in such a short amount of time. Was that something that was like, did you even have time to process that? Or were you just kind of like, here we go?
I really felt at peace with it because I was with my unit, and that had become my family the last 2 years. I can't stress how close you get with those individuals that you're in the military with, especially at that age group. Like, there was a lot of us and we had all left home. There was a lot of us that weren't married and didn't have children or anything. So we weren't leaving anything. We were leaving our families behind, but we weren't leaving like a family behind.
Yeah.
And so I didn't have a lot of like any of those emotional attachments back home. And I felt very close with my group of people that I went with. The only time it kind of hit me, the gravity of the reality of it all, was when we were landing in Kuwait, and they went over what we needed to do if we were attacked when we landed, or if they bombed us or gassed us or whatever else. And so as we're getting off the plane, we all have to put on like our masks and be covered and be ready to like go to like a bunker. And so we land the plane and they have us run off the plane, like full battle rattle, everything that you're carrying, and they're just like off, like just like you see in the movies. And it was like that first moment when we were getting ready to land and they're going over all this information of like what they expect us to do and how to keep it safe, and they're teaching the stewardess that were on there how to use their gas mask. Like literally as we're getting ready to land, they're teaching people like in air.
Wow.
And I'm just like, whoa, like this is real. Like this isn't. And then as soon as we landed, air raids started going off. We were all pushed into a bunker. Nothing happened. I believe there were some fires. They had a lot of fires there from oil fields and stuff. That was common. And so there were some fires going off, and so that's what the air raids were, but we don't know, right away. And so we're just running and getting in our gear and like just headed in. So I think that was the moment that it became real. And then when we crossed the Kuwaiti border into Iraq was another real moment. We had hundreds of kids and people standing in the road, and they were holding up American flags and yelling at us like they were happy that we were there. And it was Iraqi boys and men. So no girls, no women, just Iraqi boys and men. And I don't really know the whole situation, but as we're driving through, you could see them on both sides of the road.
Yeah.
And some of them would like run up and one of them jumped up, and there was another female in a vehicle in front of me, and he ran up and gave her a kiss on the cheek and then like jumped off the vehicle. And she's a couple years older than me, not that much, but she got out and started vomiting. Like it just, I don't know exactly what happened, but she had some kind of emotional purge, right?
Yeah.
And I just remember going, oh gosh, like what? This is so foreign. It's a foreign land. This is so bizarre. There's all these people with no shoes on standing on both sides of the road yelling at us, asking us for help and thanking us for being there. And they were throwing, like the military was just throwing out MREs to them, like just kind of giving them some food for the road, whatever. And it was like I just had never been to a foreign country, so it was just so new.
Yeah, that is very new.
It was very different. And there's a lot of sand.
So how long were you in Iraq?
A full year.
Okay.
Yeah. We were there for a full year.
And then were you on, because of your specialty, were you on base most of the time, or were you going out?
So, being a supply specialist and being the unit armor, I was in an air defense unit, and our air defense unit was set up all over Iraq in different areas. We were actually supporting communications. There wasn't a lot of air attacks, so we didn't have, the missile launches and stuff like that. We basically were like helping to set up comms, which meant that almost every day I went on some kind of convoy.
Oh, okay.
So I would go to, oh gosh, I can't even think of all the places. we were stationed in to Crit. That's like our main place that we were, but we would go out to all these different places, and yeah, I was out all the time.
Yeah.
And my job was riding in the turret. So I wasn't a driver, I wasn't a passenger. I rode in the turret of like one of our vehicles, and I had a 50 cal, and that was my job. And most of the time I was either on the front or the back of the convoy.
Wow.
Kind of a surreal world.
Truly. You see so many movies nowadays, you know, that are about war, and especially World War II and all of that. And so I feel like there's almost this desensitization of what the reality of that would be. And even like not getting hurt, but just being there, just having that responsibility to, you know, we get in our cars every day and drive around, and we're never like having to worry about that kind of thing. And so to be there on that specific mission, and I don't know, it's just such a surreal thing to think about. And I can only imagine then to feel, because I do think there's this aspect of it from our point of view, or a civilian's point of view, that's just like, oh yeah, that's what they did, you know, and maybe we understand the mechanics of it, but we would never be able to understand the emotional and mental aspects of it.
Yes. It's, well, you're there, you're desensitized yourself. You have to separate reality from doing a job.
Sure.
And so the first year I came back, I experienced more of it than when I was there.
Just processing everything.
Yeah. I did get to come home for 2 weeks in the middle of this. And I just remember being back here, and actually just felt super unsafe for me. Like emotionally, mentally, and everything. To be in war, come home and get to visit your family and be in America and like go out with your friends for 2 weeks and then head back in there. Now looking back on it, mentally, it probably would have been better for me just never to leave and then come back after the year.
Interesting.
I wanted to see my family, and I was really grateful to see my family. But what it did was it gave me a reason not to want to be there. And when I was there, I didn't feel that. So from a military perspective and kind of preserving yourself,
yeah,
I feel like that's one of the things that I probably would have just said, you know what, I'm not going to go home. I mean, you never know what's going to happen the next day, right? You don't even know if you're going to get in a car accident.
Sure.
So going to war, you have people shooting at you. You know that there's a chance you could die every single day. You could die here every single day. Like, that's the truth. But there was something about being able to come home and let my guard down for a short period of time and then try to go back to that I felt like was worse. I think the last night that I was at home, I curled up on my parents' bed at the foot of their bed, like when you're a little kid, and I just cried, and I said, I really don't want to go back. And there's nothing they could do, right? Like, I'm 20 years old. I'm laying at the bottom of their bed I just imagine like what they went through.
Yeah.
You can't protect your child. They're going to go back to war. That's it. Like, you have to just trust that they're going to be okay. And there's no way for you to comfort, protect, or anything. And I'm just laying on the bottom of their bed, and I'm just crying, and I'm like, I just don't want to go back. And then when I went back, I was grateful to be there, because I also felt bad for being at home while my comrades were still at war. So there's like so much mind drama that goes on around being there and being home. And no matter which way you go, you feel guilty. And so that was some of the stuff that I had to deal with coming back, and like releasing that actually it's just part of being a human. It's part of the human experience, and that it's okay for me not to be suffering with others all the time.
Yeah.
And so I give myself permission to be happy a lot more now, but I used to not be very good at that.
That's a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah.
And a lot of us, I think, struggle with that for various aspects, but any sort of trauma, you know, the idea of survivor's guilt, but even just in terms of your living situation and where you are in life, right? As compared to having seen other aspects of life that are not so pretty and are not escapable for some people. So that can be a really difficult thing to wrestle with.
Yeah, the relating to other people for the first year when I came back was almost impossible. It's how I ended up in the relationship that I ended up in. I ended up in a 9-year codependent relationship that was super just not healthy. But it was the only person I could relate to because he was overseas with me. And so it created a trauma bond that I could not have experienced with anybody else. And I dealt with my trauma and he didn't. And I always felt like it was my responsibility to help him to get through his. So I'm really grateful that I chose to work on my own healing.
Yeah.
Because I love being able to look back at this as a human experience. I'm not saying that some of it doesn't make me emotional, but I'm not attached to it like I was. And I'm grateful. I'm really, really, really grateful for all of those experiences.
Yeah.
And I can relate to other people's suffering.
Yes.
So
truly.
That's something that I feel like has been gifted to me. I see it as a gift now.
Yeah. It is one of the gifts of trauma is the empathy that just kind of blasts through your entire body. And yeah, I think it's a really incredible skill and truly a superpower. I think empathy is, and when you have a level of empathy that is trauma informed, it can be such a gifting to other people. So
yeah, one of the things that I have loved about coaching is it's not my job to shift somebody else's beliefs or change them or like I have no responsibility to do the work for them. And what it's really opened up for me to watch is to allow somebody to be where they need to be for as long as they need to be there and give them open doors that they can step into when they're ready. And I had that. I had a really good friend who never judged me for being in this relationship. She literally would just say, when you're ready to leave, you leave. That's all she would say to me. She didn't judge me. She didn't tell me I was stupid. She didn't say what's wrong with you. And she loved me, fully loved me. But she was just the kindest human. And she walked with me through it for 9 years. And a lot of my other friends were like, I cannot be around this. And I get it. I totally get it. I'm not upset with them at all. It is not fun to walk with somebody you love and watch them continue to hurt themselves. And I'm not sure that I could walk with somebody like a friend who wasn't willing to do anything. I don't know. I don't know at this point if I could do that.
Yeah.
But being able to hold space for somebody to move through that, like I can do that.
Yeah.
So that's like, I think learning that, like watching someone else give that to me really makes me enjoy giving that to others because, they're not stupid. They're not dumb. They're stuck and it's hard.
Yeah.
And it's because they love. It's not because they hate. It's because they love that they're stuck.
Yep.
But there's a different way to love.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So when did you get into this relationship? Was it when you were back?
I was actually, it was the last portion of Iraq. So interestingly enough, we had known each other for several years, but he was, sober in Iraq, I should say, for the most part. I don't know if I'll get in trouble for military being overseas. Probably should be sober for the most part, but he was for the most part. And when we came back, I knew he drank before, but the drinking just got so much worse. And then it was like already the trauma bond had already occurred because we went through Iraq together. And I was in a relationship for like a year and a half and we broke up in Iraq. The guy went home early and we broke up and we were young and he was an amazing guy as well. But I was devastated. I was overseas in Iraq and my boyfriend dumped me.
Yeah.
So I was devastated. And so in some ways this guy was like a rebound, but it stuck for 9 years.
Yeah. It makes sense why it stuck.
Yeah.
I totally understand that. Did you guys come home at the same time?
Yes. Like a couple days apart.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And then how long were you still in the military after you came home?
I was in the military for like another year and a half or a year, something like that.
Okay.
He stayed in. And then he deployed every other year for the next, like we were together 9 years. Out of 8 of those, he was gone another 3.
Wow.
And he had changed MOSs, which is like your job in the military. And each time he went, it was like worse. He came back a different person. He would wake up screaming in the middle of the night. he just turned to drugs and alcohol. I'm sure that there was lots of women. I know there was lots of women, not I'm sure. I know there was lots of women. We actually lived in separate states for a portion of that, and then eventually I moved back out to Texas to go to nursing school. We stayed together all through that. And he just would tell me, I have no intention of ever being somebody who doesn't drink. And I would beg, and I would go to Al-Anon, and I was like trying to do stuff for myself, and I just was so attached to fixing him, right? Like I wanted to fix him because he didn't have to suffer like this. All the while I'm like suffering horrifically with him.
Right.
And not even giving that any attention, right? It was all about him. So it was amazing. And then one day I came home from work and he threatened to kill me. And I knew he was serious. He'd never hit me before, but he was totally drunk. And he just looked at me and he said, I want to hit you. And if I start hitting you, I won't stop. And I just believed him. And I just looked at him and I just started crying. And I said, what has happened to you? Like, where are you? You're not even here. Like, where are you? And me crying just softened him because I didn't fight back. I wasn't trying to fight with him. The next day I called my family and I didn't tell them what happened, but I said, I need to come home. So I need to plan how I'm going to get home. And I had some money put away already by this time. And I actually went to my boss at work and I had to tell like a white lie. I basically said, I don't know for sure, but I think my dad has cancer and I need to go home. Because we signed a 3-year agreement with this hospital that I was working at. And so they let me out of the contract. And I started moving out 2 weeks later. That was in December. We still didn't break up until April.
Wow.
I still couldn't let him go.
Yep. And you were living apart that whole time?
We were living apart. Okay. Yeah. After I moved home, I actually invited him. I said, hey, there's a couple of really good rehabs here. If you're interested, I'm going to leave that door open for you. I'd love you to move out here and like go to the rehab. I knew he was going to say no, but I still wanted to try. And once he said no, and then our last conversation, he's like, this is the last conversation we're going to be having, huh? He just knew. And I said, yes. And then I didn't talk to him for years. And 6 months, he died of an overdose. He ended up dying of an overdose. But 6 months before he passed away, he reached out and it was like no time had passed and we were throwing little remarks at each other and joking, and he was sober for the first time and he was letting me know like I'm sober. And he asked me how I was doing and I told him I was married, and I was like he's like, what does your husband do? I'm like, he's a stay-at-home husband, like, because I didn't have any kids. And he goes, well, that's what I wanted to do. And I said, yeah, but see, the difference, Walty, is he was sober. And he goes, touche. Like, just, I mean, it was like very lighthearted.
Yeah.
And then that was the last time I ever talked to him.
Yeah.
So he just happened to reach out to me 6 months before, but this was years after we had broken up.
Oh.
Yeah. What a journey for him.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much there. I have a lot of experience in domestic violence world, so there are absolutely aspects of your story that I resonate with. Do you think that the same outcome would have happened if he wasn't in the job that he was in? Do you think that is still the path he would have walked? And I know that is a totally really useless question because it is the path that was walked.
I think it's a good question. Obviously, I can't make assumptions. If he chose different, if things happened different, right? Like he could have gotten out of the military when I did. But the choice wasn't about the military or not the military. The choice was about healing, taking responsibility for himself, and he was choosing over and over again not to do that. So it's my belief, and I could totally be wrong, but it's my belief that when somebody chooses not to do healing over and over and over again, it gets darker and darker and darker and darker. And at some point, he probably would have ended up in the same place.
Yeah. And maybe it would have just taken longer to get there, or who knows? He could have...
Or it could have went faster.
Exactly.
Because he had 4 extra years of drinking every single day and not having those yearly breaks.
Right.
Like,
and the
I don't
accountability.
know.
Yeah. No, it's very true. It's a difficult thing to, I guess, ruminate over, just because we all do make our decisions, right? And at the end of the day, we are responsible for them.
One of his last deployments, I was out there living there and we were waiting for him to get home, and he was coming home that day and I knew it. And I asked him, I said, I'll pick you up. Like, I'll come pick you up. And I was all excited about picking him up. And he's like, no, a couple of the guys are going to give me a ride home. And I said, okay. I didn't really argue with him. I just said, okay. And he showed up at my house, our house, because I had gotten it for us, and trashed, unable to walk in the house. I hadn't seen him for a year. And I was just like, that was a choice, right? Like, you haven't been drinking for a year. Like, that was a choice. You got off the plane and that was your choice.
Yeah.
So that's how he chose to live his life. And I think that was the hardest part for me, was realizing that I don't think addiction necessarily is a choice. Like, I know it's very difficult, but you do make choices along the path, and you have time to think about them, and you have time to decide what you're going to do next. And he made that decision. That was his decision. So he made those a lot. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I also think that addiction isn't a choice. I do believe it's a disease, but you still are the one that's accountable for your health. And
you're accountable for your actions regardless.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there are a lot of decisions made that aren't in favor or in, like, to help yourself. But until you actually decide to make those changes, nothing permanently is going to shift. So, yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, everybody has to take accountability for themselves, for sure.
Yeah.
Doesn't make it easy to deal with as a bystander, as a loved one, for sure.
No. Yeah, especially when you love somebody, you just want what's best for them. And watching them slowly harm themselves is pretty miserable.
Yeah. But, truly.
You know, we have a choice in life. We do.
So why nursing school?
Oh, so when I was overseas in Iraq, there was a little village that we went to, and there's this little boy. I'll never forget him. He had this black hair. So cute. He's probably about 8 years old, and he had stepped on a mine. He had stepped on the mine before we got there, like a while before, and it's called an external, it's basically an outer wire that holds your leg in place. And we were tasked with going and cleaning and kind of helping him keep it clean so that it heals, so that eventually he can walk on it. And I fell in love with the medical portion of it. And I just knew that was my next calling. Like, from right there, right then, I was like, oh, I want to do nursing. I knew that it was also in California a good way to make money. And so I was like, I could be self-sufficient and I can do something I love. And so even going into that, there was no choice. I was like, I'm going to be an ER nurse. Like, that's what I'm going to be.
Wow. Of course you are.
Yes, of course. So I actually finished school in Texas and started working at a level 1 trauma center. And I did that for a year and a half before I moved home to California.
Yeah, because you were married.
I was not married. This is before I was married.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this was when I was with my ex. But
I'm sorry. I didn't realize you weren't married.
I'm married now.
No, I know. With your ex.
No.
You and your ex never got married.
No.
Okay.
No.
Okay. Sorry. So you were with your ex.
Yes.
When you went through nursing school and became a nurse.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, we never got married. Probably something to do with the volatile relationship.
Maybe.
But it's still, I mean, there was a lot of really good parts of it. Obviously, if I stayed, there had to be some good parts of it.
Exactly. It's what a lot of people don't understand about domestic violence and volatile relationships is it's not bad all of the time. Otherwise, no one would stay. It would not be a difficult thing to extricate yourself from.
Yeah. Well, and you are in a different mind. You're not rational. You are looking through very different glasses. As somebody who's addicted to alcohol, you are just as addicted to that person. It's so interesting. And again, it is a choice to stay with them. It's not, the hard choice is to leave.
Yes.
Until you are faced with well, for me, it was my life, right? I mean, I had a million infidelities. That wasn't enough. I kept saying, if he cheated on me, if I found out he cheated on me, if he did this, I'll leave, right? But it wasn't until I was like, oh, you may end up in jail for the rest of your life and I may end up dead, that I was like, oh, I probably need to leave.
Yeah.
Like it took, for me, it was that. It was like, that was my rock bottom.
Yeah. That is a rock bottom for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. But yeah, so nursing popped in there, and then I did the level 1 trauma center, and then I moved to California and got a job there, and I worked as an RN for 9 years.
In the ER.
In the ER, majority. Okay. I did a couple other different specialties, PACU for like a year and a half, and I did telehealth for like 6 months, but majority of it was all in the ER.
Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like that might be more traumatic than going to Iraq. Like, what? That is a choice, man. You are not somebody that takes the easy road at all.
Some of my healing, I realized that I believe that a lot of my life I believed that I deserved hard, right? I don't believe that anymore. So I'm going to leave that for the younger generation to to try out.
It's a word.
Yeah. I don't believe that I deserve hard anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, and then I decided that was it for me.
Did you like working in the ER?
I loved it. I did.
What about it do you think that you really liked?
I got to work with individuals all the way from birth to death. So I got to see humans throughout their life. And I say humans because I just love referencing to that, because to me it just, I don't know, it's an image to me.
Yeah.
But
I like
these
it.
incredibly unique individuals who one day I could have a baby and then I could have somebody who was like, it was like their time to go, and everything in between, like a little knee bruise, right?
Yeah.
So some days were easy, some days were hard. I loved everything about it. Eventually it burnt me out. I was at a hospital. It was a 64 bed ER. We would see up to 500 patients a day, and we did not have the staff or the setup for it. And they just let us drown over and over and over again for years. And I could have moved. I could have gone to a different ER, which I have done many times. But I now realize I needed to be there because I really needed to get burnt out in order to kind of walk away from it. Then I was pregnant with 2 kids in the ER.
Wow.
Yeah. And one of them came early, and the other one I actually went out early because I was having contractions like at 20 weeks. So they were like, oh, you're going.
Yeah.
So that was at least, they did protect me in that sense. But after my first one was born at 34 weeks and my water broke at 31 weeks.
Wow. So
I was in the hospital for 3 weeks with her prior to having her.
Oh my.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
Yes.
So then you were still a nurse when you got remarried and obviously started having your family.
Yes.
So walking away from nursing is a relatively recent thing?
Yeah. So I had gone through 2 pregnancies, was in the ER, worked there. I worked at the same hospital for 9 years, and then COVID hit, and I was pregnant with my last daughter. So I had her, went back to work. So I was pregnant during COVID in the ER, went back to work, and gosh, we were like a year into COVID, and they came out with the mandates for my hospital. And I asked my manager like what that looked like for us and what was going to happen, and to get some information. And I come from a little bit different background. I've never had a problem in medicine, but over the last several years of having my children, I definitely went more a holistic route. I had some complications, obviously, and so I was very skeptical about getting something that was so new. I was very uncomfortable with it, and I talked to my manager about this. I actually panicked, like, what do I do? Like, and she's like, don't worry, like the pendulum swings one way, it'll swing the other way. It's going to be fine. Like, we have a lot of staff that doesn't feel comfortable with this. I'm sure it'll all work out. And I'm like, okay. And then it shifted. The whole atmosphere at work started shifting, and we were just told, you're going to need to do this, and you can write a religious exemption, but the probability that it will not be accepted. And we were just kind of made clear on that. And I was like, wow, okay. So I was a burnt out nurse who has a newborn.
Yeah.
And I was like asking my husband, what are we going to do? We lived in California. We had a beautiful home. We lived on 2 acres outside of the foothills, Sierra Nevada foothills, beautiful area.
Wow.
And really, like, everybody, if you would have looked from the outside in, like, everybody's like, oh my gosh, you guys have the perfect life. Your husband stays at home. You have 2 little girls. Like, you have this big, beautiful house. You've done well for yourself. And I was just a crumbling mess on the inside. And so I went to my managers and I just told them that I'm not going to be able to do this. So what do I need to do? And they said, well, you can wait to be fired or you can resign. And I was like, okay. I decided not to do a religious exemption for a couple of reasons for me personally. This was when I was going through a huge spiritual makeover. I had just started going back to church. I had just started going to church. It was my first time ever.
Oh, wow.
And I just kept saying, I can't utilize the religious belief because that's not why I'm doing it. And so to be in integrity with myself, I decided not to fill that out.
Yeah.
I reached out to a mental health specialist actually that was in the VA, and I kind of told him what I was going through, and I didn't know what to do. And he very kindly told me, this isn't going to get better. I can't take you out of the hospital even like for a break. I've been instructed that we're not allowed to do that. And if you're really falling apart this much, then you probably just need to leave. And I was like, whoa, okay. All right. So just like everything in my life, I sat with it. And here's where my faith really comes in, because now I can see where God has touched every single place in my life. Every time he puts me somewhere, it's for a reason. And I believe that. And I believe that he was putting this on my heart for a reason. And he was asking me to stand my ground on this. And so I wasn't mad at anybody. I just simply wanted a choice. That was it. Like, that was the bottom line. I just wanted a choice. And because that choice was being taken away from me, I wasn't okay with that. So I went to my husband and I said, hey, I'm not going to do this. What does this mean for us? And he said, well, it looks like we're selling our house. Where do you want to move? I said, I have no idea. My sister lived next door. She had 2.5 acres next to us. So we had a 5-acre compound. My parents lived 10 minutes from us. And I went and I sat in front of all them and I told them that I was going to be leaving, that I was going to be putting in resignation to my job, and that we as a family were going to be moving. We didn't know where. And my dad got mad.
Oh, wow.
He called me selfish. He was very angry. And I said, I understand how frustrating this might be for you. And I can't back down, Dad. Like, this is not something I can back down to. And lo and behold, we turned in my resignation, and within a month we were packing up and moving cross country. We just happened to visit East Tennessee, and that's where we ended up landing.
Okay. Was it for any reason other than you liked it?
Somebody had mentioned East Tennessee. Me, my sister, and my mom flew out here on a whim for 3 days. And when we got here, I said, okay, this is it. My sister ended up buying a house on that trip. My mom said, we're moving too with you guys.
What?
My dad was not happy. And we packed up. We left. My sister came 6 months later, and my parents came, and we all moved out here within a few months of each other.
Stop. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is it just you and your sister as far as siblings go?
I have an older sibling and a brother, but they're half. And I didn't grow up in town with them, but I'm very close to my older sister and my brother. But yeah, we didn't grow up together.
Okay.
So it's me and my sister who are 4 years apart. And actually, we hated each other until I went to the military.
Interesting.
And then we became good friends after that.
There you go.
Yeah.
That'll force the issue.
I was the little annoying sister, you know. It's okay. I'll own it.
That's okay. That's what that age is for, I think. So did any of your other family members work in the medical field?
My sister was an RN as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And did she leave at the same time?
She left too.
Okay.
And then my brother-in-law is a firefighter. Or he was a firefighter. He was actually a fire captain. And he had the same beliefs we did. And he ended up leaving his job as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was 3 of us that walked from our jobs.
Yeah.
Totally shifted careers.
Yep.
So, and I really believe that I was guided to that. I take that decision very serious, but I do feel like I was guided to that. The day after me and my children landed here in Tennessee, I know the viewers can't see this, but I'm on 6.5 acres in East Tennessee. The house was almost condemned. And this house went on the market the day after I landed. We drove here. I got out of the car. I looked at the mountains. I looked at my husband and I said, this is it. And he just kind of like stared at me like, oh, great. Here we go again. Like, here's another project to do. And just kind of stared at me. And he's like, we haven't even been in the house. I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'm like, I already know the house is going to be a disaster and I don't care. This is it. Like, literally God lined this up and placed this right in front of us. And I have no doubt that we're exactly where we need to be. And each step of the way, I felt that, you know, we are now creating like a little tiny homestead. It's not very big yet, but it's getting bigger. We have an orchard. We have chickens. We're just putting up fencing for livestock. We share some sheep with our neighbor. We're going to be getting a few cows. We have a above the ground garden going in, plus an in-ground garden where we were able to get potatoes this year. We've never done any of this, and I'm like learning it on the fly.
I feel like this could be a whole nother episode.
I know, sorry.
No. I'm just like, homesteading is so cool. It is not something that I feel like I am able to do, not skill-wise, just like lifestyle-wise. Yes. But I have so much respect for people that are doing it and like carrying it out. I think it's amazing.
It's definitely been placed on both of our hearts for a long time. And if you think about all this too, where we were located in California, we couldn't have created this. And so it's just funny, like we're being faced with things that are hard decisions. And yet every single time we lean into what we feel called to do, I just feel like the path, oh, there you go. Like you're open. We have the next step in front of you. We have the next thing available to you. We're growing a community here. We have an incredible church family, which I never thought that I would be part of. I did not grow up at all in the church, but it's been a huge part of our life now.
Yeah.
And I'm very also spiritual. So I wasn't sure if I'd find a church that I felt comfortable with, but I did.
Yeah.
That really accepts the fact that, I don't know, would you call it on the spectrum of beliefs? I don't know.
Yes. Yeah.
I like that.
I like that too.
It's definitely just, you know, I feel like I'm definitely on the fringes. But I trust it and I keep going and I keep seeking God and I just keep getting handed little bits of like, okay, perfect. Thank you for doing that. Here you go.
Yeah.
And I see it so much now.
Yeah.
But I do feel like this land was a gift to us.
I think it's so interesting, the pattern in your life of you have this desire or this dream or this calling and you go at it full force. And it's almost like something has to interrupt you to make you turn because you are so dedicated, which is not a bad thing, but you are so dedicated to what you're doing in that moment that it's almost like there has to be an external force that says, all right, you need to pivot, right? And so it's so interesting how that has played out multiple times in your life and has led you to this. And ultimately, the way that you handle those pivots, though, is what matters because you could be sitting here very bitter and very upset about the things that have happened in your life and the decisions that you've needed to make as a result of them. But you're not. You're very much like, and then this happened and it was great. And so it ended up being the absolute best thing that could have happened for us. So I do love that.
And that's so funny that you say that too, because right when you were saying that, I was like, yes. And I'm getting so much better at listening to the pivot before it has to be a dramatic event. Like, apparently I really needed a lot of the dramatics before.
You know what? That's okay.
And now I'm like, oh, did you ask me to go turn over here? I'm like, okay, I'll go do that now.
Yeah.
And so like, now I'm like much more in flow with life. But you're right. Like trauma had to occur in order for me to pivot. And that's, again, something that I see with individuals. It's like, is the trauma happening to you? Yes. But is it happening for you? Because would you be able to move out of this without that?
Yeah.
Would you be able to learn the lesson or figure it out without it? And like, I just don't think that a lot of times we're capable because we're not listening.
Yeah.
We're not listening
I agree
to the
with
nudges.
That. I agree with that. I mean, I wouldn't wish trauma on anybody.
No.
But I do think that I was having a conversation with somebody recently where we were talking about people that have experienced trauma have like this extra sense, almost like this sixth sense in terms of, you know, what you need for your life and how things are playing out. There is an extra vision or something, I don't know what to call it, that trauma opens up, and it's a terrible way to get there. But there is a gifting in that, like we said before. If nobody deserves to go through trauma, but so many people do, and in different aspects of their life. And if you do, and you can take that and learn to, even for just yourself, learn. The phrase that keeps coming to mind for me is hold things loosely. I had a guest actually say that last year, and it has stuck with me. Learning how to hold things loosely so that you're not so attached to them that, you're strangling them and then you're left with dust. But learning when to let go and when to press in.
Oh, yeah. Such a good saying.
Yeah. I can't take credit for it. So
I've heard it before, but it is super powerful.
Yeah.
Like, to have that loose attachment, for sure.
Yeah. First of all, I think it's fantastic that your whole family moved with you. That is so cool.
And they're all so happy. My sister just bought I was going to say a llama farm. It is not a llama. An alpaca farm.
So cool.
She's 6 minutes away, and she lives on 15 acres, and literally has 4 alpacas, goats, and it's called Storybook Farm.
Cool.
Like, that's the name of it.
I love that.
They just moved in like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So her whole dream is like coming true. She's always wanted an alpaca farm. I don't know why, because she's never been into animals, but man, it's like perfect for them. It's a freaking beautiful place.
That's awesome.
Yeah. My parents live on a lake community. They're not on the lake, but they're like in a lake community, and they're building friends and relationships, and like their lives are 10 times better. They have more income because the cost of living is, so their retirement's going further. They're so happy.
Good.
So it's pretty amazing that like how much of a ripple effect one thing has.
Yeah.
And what's even more amazing is, again, I never grew up in church, but my entire family is going to church with us.
Wow.
Entire family. And I never thought I'd see that. So on Sunday we take up a full row.
So what sparked that for you guys?
For me, I just felt like I was struggling all the time. I felt like I had this incredible life, and I was just struggling all the time. I felt like I was in struggle. I would be grateful, but it would be short-lived by overwhelm, frustration, feeling like just everything was too much. Children were too much. Working was too much. Relationships were too much. And you look at my life and people would be like, it's so beautiful, but I was a mess. And I kept picking up different books. Like, I was just searching for something. My husband grew up Catholic, and I just asked him, I said, I've always had this desire to like go to church and be part of a church, but I never wanted to go because in my head, and this is, please nobody take offense to this, okay? This is my journey. I was like, I don't want to go to church because I'll have to be like that. So in my mind, I had this idea of what it meant to go to church, and it was not true, but it is something I believed, right? Like, so I had this idea. It's kind of like, I think in some ways, it's like Walty's saying, I never not want to drink because I never want to be that person. And I had like this idea of what that person looked like. Totally false. And I'm grateful that I got that opportunity to find that out. And now I question a lot of my beliefs all the time. So we're at a really good place in life now. But I had this want in my heart to go, and it kept pulling at me and pulling at me and pulling at me. And so we started going to this little church that was right around the corner from us. And it was right before COVID. So it was right before all this happened. And we started going on a regular basis. And I joined a Bible study, and I spent time there. And I did feel really out of place, honestly, but I just kept going. I just made the decision that I was going to try this out for a year, and that it was important to me. And that no matter what, I was going to take something away from this, and I was going to learn from it. And ended up getting baptized. And then COVID happened like right after that.
Oh, wow.
And the whole church closed down. We didn't have our church community, so I was separated from that. It was a really interesting time because I just started really getting involved. And I tried to bring my family, but they just were not interested in it at the time. Like they weren't there. And I don't know. We came here and things started shifting.
Mm-hmm.
There was a church that we were going to, me and my husband, when we first moved here. My sister came and she's like, I really can't go. It just doesn't feel right for me. And I said, okay. She's like, there's this church across the street. We're just going to try it out. So we went with them. Every single one of us fell in love with it. It just was the right fit. It was really, really focused on Jesus and his life. It's a vineyard church, and so it's just a little bit different. But it was very easy to feel welcome there, and it was easy to ask questions. Like, I did not feel any judgment. I could ask like the craziest questions and be like, I don't believe that. And they'd be like, okay. Like, I just
good.
No,
that's how it should be.
Yes.
Yeah,
it was just really, really welcoming, beautiful, wonderful, amazing people. And now my husband works there. My brother-in-law, he does some stuff there as well, and like, we're just really involved. And
awesome.
I never thought that was going to happen.
Yeah. Hey, again, it's when you're open and you're not like, no, this is how we have to do it, you know, it can only be this way. That's when things start to happen, and you start to find out like the little gems that you never would have known before. So yeah, life is cool that way. I do want to ask you, going back to your nursing stuff real quick, just not with the vaccines and stuff like that, but just in general. I mean, you had to have been so burnt out just working through COVID. I mean, what was that like for you? And pregnant.
Yeah.
And with a little kid.
Yeah.
Like,
at the beginning of COVID, I was pretty afraid. I was pretty afraid, not because of what I was seeing at my own hospital, but because of what I was hearing. And then being pregnant and not knowing anything about this whole thing, I actually had talked to my parents about possibly keeping my newborn when I had to go back to work and like separating myself from her. We never had to do that. What was really hard was we had different areas of the ER, and one portion of it was set up for COVID patients. And what was really hard in there was that family wasn't allowed in there. We were all in full gear, but we were walking in between rooms. So you would disinfect and do all of these things that you needed to do. So what that created was, it would take you time to get in the rooms. It would take you time to get out of the rooms. And then we would be given 4 patients still, but you had a fraction of the time to work with them. So what it created was this environment where you're late on everything, and the people who were really sick really needed you in there, and you would end up with not a lot of help. Yeah. And so the frustration rate would just go up so much, because you'd be banging on the door like, can you just bring me a blood tube? Can you just bring me this? Can you just bring me that? And if there wasn't anybody around, like, you'd have to stop everything you're doing, get completely disinfected, leave the room, regown, and then go back in. And so the quality of care that you were giving them just felt horrible. I mean, I don't think there's one nurse that didn't complain about how you just felt like you were not being able to support these patients the way that we should be able to. Yeah. You didn't have the support you needed. And then on top of that, they didn't have anybody there to help. So sometimes we have and this is through all of COVID. Some of it was nice not having a bunch of patients' family there, because sometimes seeing 500 patients a day, we get really busy and we have patients all over the halls, and having everybody have a family member, it gets too much in there. Sure. So I understand that. But when you have somebody who's older who really needs help with everything, going to the bathroom, sitting up, anything, sip of water, and you're an ER nurse, you don't have time to do all the basic needs stuff as well as you would like. Yeah. And we didn't have the techs that we needed. It is a common theme in ERs, especially now. When I first started, it was not like that. The hospitals I worked at when I first started, I really felt like majority of the time I had the help I needed. But these last, I would say 3 years, 3 years, really the last 3 years, I've never seen hospitals where you had such sick individuals who came in multiple times and were not getting better. Our health system is not doing well. We are just not doing well. We are not taking care of our patients the way that we need to be. And more than that, we're not creating healthy individuals. So we're just becoming a sicker and sicker group of people. Yeah. And
well, that I definitely agree with you.
Yeah. I mean, autoimmune disorders are through the roof. Neurologic disorders are through the roof. And obesity is through the roof, heart problems are through the roof, but it's more than that. When you are working in an ER and you just see the same people being rotated through the ER over and over, it's like, what are we doing here?
Yeah.
Because if they have to be in crisis every 4 days to be seen by a doctor, like, are we doing them a service here?
Sure. I feel so much for any medical professional, but especially in like triage. I just can't even imagine how burnt out just from doing your day to day. I mean, forget all of the bureaucracy of it, right? I mean, which you don't, because it's in your face, it's right there. But just the having to go through day to day, I don't blame anybody that got out of that line of work after the last 3 years. I don't, because I would not be able to do it.
Yeah, I feel for the medical system. My hope would be that something radical changes and that we get back online and healthcare is healthcare again. Because again, it was not like this when I started. It is very different now. But unfortunately, just like so many things in life, I feel like it has to get so much worse before it will get better.
Yeah.
And then in pops nurse coaches, which is what I do now. I'm a board certified nurse coach, and what we're seeing is thousands of nurses across the country who are leaving and creating private practices, coaching individuals for health reasons, like life coaching, business coaching. I do business and life coaching, but health coaching is a huge one. There's ones, everything you can think of. They're even starting to hire nurse coaches into businesses or companies such as like a construction company. Like they're actually hiring a nurse coach to help with wellness with their employees.
Wow.
So this is like it's an up and coming thing. It's very brand new, but what I think we're going to end up seeing, because I talk to so many nurses now that like have the same vision, is I feel like we're really going to see wellness centers. We do have like functional medicine doctors that pop up. This is going to be different than that. I feel like this is going to be true healing, as in mind, body, and spirit, and it's going to be all connected. And it's why so many nurses are drawn to nursing, and we're not able to perform at that capacity.
Sure.
So you're going to see these little clinics and stuff pop up, and I think that they're going to be everywhere eventually. And it is going to be like holistic health, where the goal is to get you healthy and not diagnose, but actual treat conditions. And really where that needs to start for a lot of people is trauma. If you aren't stepping into the healing of your trauma, it's going to manifest physically, mentally, and emotionally. Mine came with an eating disorder. And then eventually, when I took care of the eating disorder, my body refuses to let go of weight. And that's probably a lot of the trauma that I still carry. And so also to be kind about that to yourself, right?
Yeah.
Like we're all created differently. We all carry trauma differently, but the body does not forget. It remembers. And so you can't think that eating bad for, 30 years, you're not going to get better over 2 weeks. So it's a lifelong journey. But I really think we're going to see that in a huge capacity.
That's so interesting. I actually just started seeing a functional medicine doctor because I have several autoimmune issues that I've not gotten any relief, and it's just been a mess. And so I was like, I need to make some sort of move. And it's just atrocious how insurance won't cover that kind of medicine simply because it's targeted at healing and not at diagnosing.
Yes. And there's so much that could be healed by just starting with like gut health. I know that's a fad word right now, but it's so true. But the problem is too, in order to be able to do that, you have to be in a state of mind where it can be hard. And so it's like, again, it's that mind, body, spirit. If one of them is out of alignment, one of them is not on board, it's really hard to make any moves in health.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I am a big proponent of that as well. Trauma, body keeps a score. Yes. All of that. Yes. I completely
Such a good book,
believe
by
that.
the way.
Yes.
If anybody is looking for a good book, that's a good book.
Truly. Yes, it is. And really, there's so much to it. And I feel like we're just starting to talk about this on a like on a mainstream level,
Yes.
which is so helpful, but also, you know, there's a lot of noise. And so that can be hard. But I am very thankful that more of this is becoming okay to talk about and normal to talk about, because I would say that most of us have experienced some sort of trauma. I would even call COVID a community trauma.
Oh, yes.
Right? Like,
oh, yeah.
no one wants to talk about, well, not no one, but a lot of people don't want to talk about it, or just don't even realize that just no matter what you believe about COVID, what everybody went through, a global health scare, that created a lot of, you know, mandates and lockdowns and all of that. That is community trauma.
Yeah.
So we all have a lot of feelings about that, even if we're not talking about them or addressing them. We all have a lot that was born out of that. And so I think that we like to talk about trauma as this like really othering word. And it's like, I would say like 90% of us have some sort of trauma in our lives that we have not dealt with.
I would go out on a limb and say probably 99.9%.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's very few people that I feel like we don't even know all the trauma. I've been in the healing space for years now. I've had counselors, I've had coaches, I've done holistic medicine. I've all of the things that you can think of. If there's something, I've probably tried it. And I find new bits and pieces about myself all the time where I'm like, oh, I haven't dealt with that yet.
Mm-hmm.
And if it was all in front of my face, I couldn't deal with it all at once. So I'm grateful that it kind of shows up. I have enough tools now, though, that I can at least tap into and do what I need to do for next. But yeah. Oh, my goodness.
Absolutely. And I think, too, it's important to talk about that there is a certain privilege in being able to access this stuff, just because, you know, there are single moms working 3 jobs and, you know, can't even have time to sit with their kid for dinner. So, or whatever. There's a lot of different situations in life. And so I always think of this, and I'm going to get the quote wrong, so I'm just going to kind of paraphrase it. But it's basically like a first generation is the like laborers, the second generation is like the doctors, lawyers, and the third generation is the artists, and, you know, it values like cultural things and stuff like that. And when you think about it that way, you really do have to, I mean, I think it puts in perspective generational wealth, but it also puts into perspective that it really is a privilege to be in that space at the top there that says, I can take space in my life to focus on these things. It's not going to financially ruin me. It's not going to, you know, make it so that I can't get to my job on time or whatever. So I do think it's important to acknowledge, because while I love having these conversations and while I agree that all of this is so important, I think there's still so much barriers to access. And that's wrong. I mean, no matter how you slice it, I think everybody should have access to this. But the reality is that we don't.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a lot of the reason that so many nurses are called to this type of work. Not saying that it's cheap. You still have to, like, but I think as we see this build, it's going to be more accessible. And I think that's the point. Right now, it's not super accessible to everybody. But I do believe that as we go and grow this, that it will be. I also, like when you were bringing up the single mom, that's also, I have a really, really big heart on creating communities. And so community gardens, community eating, like I totally believe that there is a way to cultivate that.
Yes.
And I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's not that easy. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying that it's doable. And I'm saying that it's worth trying. It's worth trying to figure it out. And that's my take on it, because I don't think we were not created to be raising families and children and all these things alone. We were just not.
Yeah. I agree. I think community is so important, and it's something that we really lack, especially in America. You know, we are such an individualized society, and you look around the world and we are so unlike so many other societies and communities around the world.
Mm-hmm.
So we do know that it's doable,
Mm-hmm.
right? We just have to shift our cultural thinking. But I think it's important. And I think that's where change happens, right? That it's only going to be on the community level that change really starts to take shape.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. It will come from within.
Yes.
And it'll come from a want and a need. And it'll come from some, I don't know, you'll find groups of people who are incredible leaders who will just, and it's already happening. That's my belief is it's already happening. Like, we're seeing the shift.
I agree.
It's going to take a while. It's not coming fast, but
absolutely. Oh gosh.
But it's coming.
No, I absolutely agree. And when you talk about change and shifting, you're talking like generations. It's not going to be, it may not even be in your lifetime, but that doesn't mean you don't work towards something. And I'm not saying it can't be in your lifetime, but I'm just saying the work towards betterment shouldn't only be because of you. It should be because I want to leave something better than what I found or what I was born into.
Yeah. I hear somebody talk about like, leaving a family legacy or leaving like, and my thought comes from that.
Yeah.
Like, what are you leaving? Meaning, what have you left to continue to work on?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that that's such a beautiful way of looking at it. Not just like, what are you leaving to your children, but what are you actually leaving them to continue to work on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sure. There's power in that for sure. So you started talking about nursing coaching and your coaching. So explain what you do.
Yes. Okay. So right now I have, I'm a coach. That's what I work as. I do life coaching for a lot of individuals who are searching basically for a different life. Like, they're in a life they don't want to be there, or they have this idea, right? They know that there's something that they want to do, such as creating a homestead, and they're just like, I have no idea how to get there.
Sure.
And it's like, okay, like, I just help them find that path, but I help them do it. I don't do it for them. They create it all themselves, and I support them through those shifts and changes. I also recently, I've had a lot of individuals come to me with pretty bad depression, anxiety, stuff like that. And we work from a spiritual point of view, and I coach around that as well. So it's interesting because I say life coaching, but really it can be any aspect. And then I also do some health coaching because obviously they're all tied together.
Sure.
The other job that I'm doing currently is I am a first-year business coach for a lot of individuals. People who are just starting out their business come to me, and I help them create that. I've done it. I have a multiple six-figure business, and so I help others to create that as well. So that's been really fun. And I've done that with nurse coaches, but I've done that with the general public as well.
Yeah.
And it's been a blast.
That's awesome.
So I do both. I have some groups that I run a couple times a year, but mostly I do one-on-one, and I take very few clients, just the way that I like to keep it. I like space in my life to do what I want to do.
That's exactly right. It's practice what you preach, right?
Exactly. So, but yeah, I love it. I love watching people win. I love watching them step into the next portion of their life. I love watching individuals build confidence and just all the things that are like, I want to do all these things. I'm like, okay. And then they do the first couple of things and they're like, oh my gosh, I did it. I'm like, I know. Just help them to not be as afraid, right?
Yeah.
'Cause it's just scary when you're reaching, but.
Sure. How'd you get into coaching? Like, where did that come from for you?
My sister actually became a nurse coach before me. And I watched as she created a business. She supports other nurse coaches. That's what she does.
Okay.
That's not what it started as, but that's kind of all the nurse coaches kept coming to her as they saw her business grow. And so she runs the Successful Nurse Coaches. If there's any nurses out there that are ever even thinking about becoming a coach, like, go listen to a couple of their podcasts. They're so good.
What's her podcast name?
The Successful Nurse Coaches.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. It's really good, but it gives you a lot of information about what it is like as a nurse to coach, and it's just really great information, really inspiring. So she did this, and as she's growing her business and everything, I was finishing my bachelor's, which at the time you needed a bachelor's for. You don't need that anymore.
Okay.
There's you can have your associate's degree in nursing and still get the certification. So as I'm watching her I decided to go for it. And the program that I went through changed my entire life. Like, it just changed everything in my life. And I knew it was exactly what I was supposed to be doing. And then as I got to pull from all my life experiences and realize like how unique nurses are to coach. We've walked with people at birth, we've walked with people at death, and a lot of us have our own, you know, everyone has their own story.
Sure.
But because we've spent so much time with other humans caring for them, we just there's a uniqueness in that.
Yeah.
To be able to really hold that kind of space for people as they go through their transformations. I was like, well, look, everything lined up exactly to put me in this position, and I'll tell you, it's a dream job because I believe in it so much.
Yeah.
I really believe in healing generational trauma.
Yep.
Building healthy relationships, building a life that you don't need a vacation from.
Ooh, I like that one. Yeah.
That was in a book, by the way, and I wish I could reference it for you right now because I don't want to take credit for that. But it was in a book, and I will just say that sentence resonated with me so much that I kept saying, how can I create a life that I don't want a vacation from?
Yeah.
And for the most part, besides when I'm not feeling well, I have the life I don't need a vacation from. We travel. I get to work. I love my daily routine. I get to spend a lot of time with a lot of incredible people. I'm sure it could just get better and better and better. I have to build my capacity to hold more joy.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey.
If that's my worst problem.
Seriously. But it's true. I think it is important to, you know, acknowledge that we're never finished.
Yeah.
Right. There's always something to work on. And that doesn't have to be like a productivity driven thing. It can just be like an open thing of, hey, I am a learning human just walking through life and waiting for the next lesson or whatever that looks like. Right. So yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge for sure.
Yeah.
I think it is incredibly interesting that you went from such a regimented beginning, military, nursing, and you are doing coaching now, and you have built this life that you don't need a vacation from. I think it's fabulous, actually, because this hasn't always been your life, and so you can look back and call out differences. You don't hate your life from before either, which I think is a huge thing. You're not bitter, you're not resentful. But then I also love it because, especially for young people, I think there is this idea that you have to pick what you want to do and then you can't do anything else.
It's not true.
It's not true.
No, it's not true. Try many things.
Try all of the things.
Try all of the things. Go to school for something, change your mind, do it again.
Yep.
It's like, oh, you're not stuck in one place. And that's how I felt in my job at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm going to have to do this forever. This is what my life is supposed to look like. I checks all the boxes. It's perfect. And I look back and I'm just like, no.
Yeah.
Like, no, you don't have to settle. You don't have to settle for what is good on the outside or even what society says is good for you. I say that with a total love. Working so many hours a week, being at home with my family, cultivating a homestead. I mean, a lot of people are going to be like, what are you doing? And I'm creating a life that I freaking love.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to look like anything. If you can figure out income,
Mm-hmm.
I do tell my clients that often, you can figure out the income. There are ways if you're willing to try.
Yeah.
You're not stuck in one spot. There are ways. We have a very interesting society now where, a lot of people don't even realize the skills they possess. They don't even know it. Sit down and write down every job you've ever had and tell me what kind of skills you needed for each one.
Mm-hmm.
When you do that, you're going to be like, whoa, actually, I'm pretty qualified for all of these other things.
Yeah.
And you don't even realize it. We definitely sell ourselves short in so many parts of our lives. And that's, again, why I love coaching, because I get to point out all the places that you're winning, all the different areas that you've grown or achieved or skills that you've learned, and then we get to utilize all of them and create something different.
Yeah.
I used to think that I wasn't creative. Yeah. It was like, I can't write. I don't draw. Like, I'm just not that creative. And then I start laughing as I look around my office and as I look out my window, and I create all the time on a daily basis.
Yeah. And I think too, it's just about unpacking things out of boxes and letting it just be, right? And so creativity isn't about drawing or writing or, there's so many aspects to creativity, right? And so we know ourselves, like NO, like you can't do this, you can't do that because you're not good at this one aspect of it. Yeah. That doesn't even matter.
Yes.
Right? Like it's not, you don't have to be good at all of the creative things to be creative.
I am not good at tech. And I still run a successful business.
There you go. It happens. Yeah, right? Exactly. There's such opportunity, and not everything is going to be successful, but that's okay too. I think we should get very comfortable with failure.
I love that you just said that, because my motto this last year, I have a coach myself. I will probably have coaches for years to come. I actually have a spiritual mentor that I work with also. It's very important to me to develop that for myself. And the thing that I wrote out for this year as my motto was, I'm not afraid of failure. I'm not afraid of failure. I'm not afraid of failure. What that has done to my confidence to try things is amazing.
Yeah.
Because what would you do if you weren't afraid of failure? What would you create?
Hey.
It's all in our head. We're the only person getting in our way.
Yep. Agreed. Agreed. Absolutely. I think that failure can be a huge gift, just like trauma can be a gift. And I do not say that flippantly at all. I do not say that to minimize anybody's trauma or failure. However, once you go through it and you realize that not only did you survive it, but you've learned something from it, and then when you get back up and try again, you know what not to do. There is something so poignant in learning these lessons about ourselves. And it's not that one thing failed so you can't try a different way of the same thing, right? It's just that, okay, that didn't work in that season at that time. Okay, great. Like, just get back up and do it again. And one of my favorite quotes is Winston Churchill. Well, I think it's Winston Churchill. You never know with the internet. As far as I know, it's from Winston Churchill. But it's, success is not final, failure is not fatal. And that's actually only part of the quote, but that's the part I like, because we often talk about like our fear of failure. But what we don't talk about is the fact that success, once you've quote unquote made it, there's no guarantees that it's going to stay. So get comfortable with failure, because you're going to fail a lot in life and over again. And you may have something successful one day and the next day it's a failure. What are you going to do? What are you going to do with that failure? Are you going to like sit in it and just like, that's it? I tried and it was successful. Now it's not. I'm done. Or are you going to say, okay, let's try the next thing? So.
Well, and it's funny because if you talk to any interviews with like multimillionaires, their first company usually was a success and then a failure. And they ended up going and like lost everything and then did it again.
Yep.
And if they would have done it again, they would have never been where they are. And so, and I say millionaires because a lot of people use that as a term of success,
sure.
Right? I see it a little differently, but it's a really good way to get like, yeah, they could have just ended there.
Yeah.
And just started over.
Yeah.
I said, screw it. I can do it better this time.
Yep.
I learned so much from this experience.
Yeah.
I fail all the time with my health and I'm constantly learning. And I said that today, actually, before I met with you. I am still going through health stuff. Like, my journey is not complete. It will never be complete.
Mm-hmm.
I had lost some weight. I had gained some back. I had met with my coach. I was like, this is really frustrating. And then one of the things I said was, but I haven't failed because I haven't given up.
Yeah.
And she was like, yeah, exactly. And I'm like, yeah. And again, I say these things out loud, but I do believe them now. And it took a while for me to believe them.
Yeah.
But I believe them now.
Yeah.
I haven't failed because I haven't, I mean, I may have failed a portion, but like I haven't given up. So I definitely.
But I like that. I like the framing of that, because I do think it is important mentally for us. Like, as human beings, I think what we think about ourselves matters so much to our quote unquote success. And I think framing what success is and what failure is a huge part of creating positivity and creating lasting change for ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, you alluded to this before, but success doesn't look the same for all people, right? Not everybody wants to work a corporate job 12 hours a day and make millions of dollars. Some people want that out of life. And you know what? If that's what you want and you achieved it for yourself, good for you. But whatever success means to you and that can change too. I think that's a really important, I'm just like, let's throw all of the stuff out here, but the ability to change your mind and be confident in those changes as they happen. Oh, yeah. Right? Like you should not be the same person that you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, right?
Totally, because I'd still be a nurse. I mean, I am still a nurse. That's
right.
But I would still be in the ER because that was the dream for me.
This is what I was supposed to do. Yes. I can't change my mind. Like, I worked so hard for this. Everybody knows I do this. Yes. Like, what am I going to do? What are they going to think if I just leave now?
Oh, yeah. Shifts in identity. It was fun.
Yeah.
What do you do now? You're a nurse that does what? I'm just going to say I'm a coach.
Yeah.
I don't know. Totally. I mean, like, I rate my success now completely different. It is wrapped up in time with my family, being in nature, and creating time and space for that. That's more important to me. And when I feel successful when I have uninterrupted time with my children, when I can be present, when I'm not overwhelmed. So like, that's what I strive for.
Yeah.
Oh man, my poor kids. My poor kids have had so many versions of me.
That's okay. They're better for it.
They are, but man, I just like the overwhelm of motherhood was so big for me. And I have so much compassion for that version of myself.
Yeah.
Now.
Well, but also let's reframe this, because your kids could have had only one version of you, and it could have been something that was super unhealthy and dysfunctional, but you chose to change.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, man. Mama guilt's real.
I'm not a mother, but I know enough of them.
It's real. And like I said, I mean, I have compassion for that version of me, and I have compassion for my kids getting to hang out with her so much for so long. But you're right. I mean, it was definitely a choice, and it was an intentional choice of like, oh man, I do not want to be this person anymore.
Yeah.
And then searched long and hard and did a lot of work.
It takes a lot of courage to change. Truly. I mean, we're talking about it like everybody should do it, and I truly believe they should. I believe we all should be changing and evolving, but it's hard. It's hard, and not just in the day-to-day working of it, but just in getting the courage to do it and to maybe not be the person that everybody thinks that you should be or are. It can be really difficult to feel like you're on the outside of something. But it is important, and it is worth it, and the people that love you will rally around you.
I agree.
So, yeah. Well, I have one question that I ask everybody, and I guess if there was one theme of the podcast, this would kind of be it. But through the lens of your experience, what does compassion mean to you?
Ooh. When you say the word, the only thing that comes to my mind is honestly, absolutely pure love coming from that lens. Like, in fact, when you just said through my lens, I just had a picture of my entire story, not just mine, but everybody who's been in my life, and gratitude and absolute just like love for each version, each portion of me, each portion of everybody who has been a part of my life. Even my ex, I still immensely love him. I have never been angry with him. I mean, not never. I was not angry after we separated at all. Like, I've never been held that. So for me, compassion is really loving through it, I guess.
I love that, because we all go through seasons. None of us are immune to that, right?
Gosh, no. I've gone through seasons. I've lost friends. I have not been the best version of myself many times and had to suffer the consequences of that.
Sure.
And I have a lot of compassion for myself now.
Yeah. I love that answer, though. I do. I think that is very much a true mark of compassion. I would agree with that. So, well, thank you so much. Is there anything that like we didn't cover that you were like, I really wish she was going to ask me this, and then I didn't?
No.
Okay.
I don't know what I was expecting, but you took me down a lane of so much of my life. It was actually really cool to get to share
thanks.
kind of the entirety of my story instead of just bits and pieces. I mean, I'm sure there's other parts of my story, but those are the big highlights in my life that have really had profound changes or experiences, right?
Yeah.
Like those are the ones that like stick out to me. Yeah.
That's great. Well, I'm glad that you feel that way. You have a beautiful story and you tell it beautifully. So I just really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Human Experience. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with your friends and family, share it on social media, and rate and review it on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. You can also support the podcast financially by going to my website, thehxpod.com, linked in the show notes, and clicking on Donate. It takes a lot of time and resources to create this podcast, so every little bit helps. Everyone has a story, and I'd love to hear yours. So be sure to check out the show notes for more information about how to stay in touch. Do good and love